In this lesson, we're going to look at how task achievement affects your overall score, and also we're going to look at how some small mistakes can quickly reduce your task achievement score and stop you from getting the overall score that you need in Academic IELTS Writing Task 1. My name is Lar Ryan. I've been an IELTS examiner and an IELTS teacher at the British Council. I have well over a decade of experience helping students achieve success in the IELTS test, and I am the founder of Complete Test Success. Before we jump into the lesson, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. So to get a high score in task response, your overview needs to be appropriate, but also the descriptions of the categories need to be appropriate. So we will look at these two things separately, but first of all, let's look at the actual question that I am going to base this lesson on. So here we see three pie charts, one for 1980, one for 2000, and one for 2020. And as with any overview, you first need to analyze the data and see what changes have occurred. So we're just going to look at the difference between 1980 and 2020 for the overview. What happened in 2000 isn't that significant until we're describing the categories in detail later on in the essay. So for the overview, what I just want to say is that the figure for spinach went down, and then the figures for all other categories went up. So very basic, very straightforward, but the overview will look like this. Overall, the quantity of broccoli, garlic, peas and ginger being imported had increased by the end of the period, whereas the amount of spinach had decreased. Okay, so that's a pretty basic but appropriate overview, and what we're going to see is how that will allow us to get a high score. So let's just say, for example, that we're aiming for a band 7, and we can already get a band 7 for coherence and cohesion, vocab and grammar. So we have the language ability and we can communicate clearly. But look at how our response to the task can affect the overall score. So as I said, we have 7 in the other areas already. And for this overview, it would allow us to get a band 7. Now, presuming that we haven't made mistakes in other parts of the essay. So this overview would be appropriate for a 7. And to get the overall score, we average the 4 band scores, the 4 individual band scores. So for this, we would get an overall score of 7. Next, I'm going to change that overview ever so slightly, and you can see how this one small mistake has a drastic impact on our overall score. So this is the overview again, but this time I've added that the amount of spinach had decreased to 350 tons. Now in an overview, we should not include any specific data like that. And because we've made this mistake, automatically our task response score will go down to 6. And then our overall score, because the average is rounded down, will be 6.5 for our task 1 answer. So there you can see how important task response is for our overall score and how a small mistake can have a big impact on our score. So next, I'm going to change the overview with a more significant mistake to help you understand how to avoid that and to see how it affects our score. So this time the overview says, overall, the quantity of some vegetables had increased, whereas others had decreased. Now this time it's too vague. That's not clear enough. We're saying some vegetables and other vegetables, but we could have guessed that already. So for this, our task response score goes down to a band 5, and the overall is still 6.5. But we can go a little bit further with this, and here's an even more significant issue with this overview. It says, overall, the quantity of all vegetable types had increased by the end of the period. Now, this is just wrong. That is inaccurate, because you will remember that the amount of spinach had decreased. So because it is inaccurate, the information is wrong, we now end up with a task response score of 4 and an overall score for task 1 of band 6. So those are the things that can go wrong with the overview when we're just describing the graph in general, but then later in the essay, we need to include descriptions in our body paragraphs of the specific things that happen to each category. So let's look in a similar way of the types of mistakes you can make that will quickly reduce your overall writing score. Before we look at that, let me remind you that you can get even further support from me by joining my email list and attending my free live feedback lessons that I have every week for reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and those are held on Zoom. So find the link in the description, click on that, and sign up now. So for spinach, I wrote this. Starting at 500 tonnes, spinach imports had a slight decrease to 450 tonnes in 2000, but by 2020 had fallen even further to 350 tonnes. So that description is completely fine, it has all the information we need, and all the grammar and vocab is acceptable. So with that, we would be able to get a band 7 for task achievement, presuming that we haven't made any mistakes in other parts of our answer. So again, if we had 7 for coherence and cohesion, vocab, and grammar, with this response, we would be able to get a band 7 in task achievement, and once more, a band 7 overall for task 1. But let's look at what happens when we start making small mistakes. So you can see here, it says starting at 50 tonnes, but the data in the chart is 500 tonnes. Now imagine we've done everything else perfectly, all of the data is right, all of the years are right, our grammar, our vocab, everything is perfect. This one mistake of writing 50 instead of 500 means that the data is inaccurate, and that results in a task response score of band 6 and an overall score of band 6.5. So here's an even bigger mistake. This time, instead of writing spinach imports, I wrote its imports. So now, in this situation, the reader, or in this case the examiner, will not know exactly which category is being described. This means that it is unclear and the task response score goes down to band 5. And then of course the overall score will still be 6.5. Now let's look at an even more severe mistake in relation to our task response score. This time we have spinach imports had a slight decrease to 450 tonnes in 2000 and then dropped further after that. So here we're missing the data from the first year, we're missing the data from the final year, and therefore we have not covered all of the key features, and that means our task response score is 4 and our overall score is band 5. So with that, you can see how important task response really is for your overall score, and how a few very small mistakes can really have a massive impact on your end score. So it's very important that you understand those mistakes, it's very important that you avoid those mistakes, and hopefully that will mean that you can get the score you need in your test. So besides that, I just want to let you know that I intend making more videos like this over the coming weeks. So if you have any ideas of things that you would like me to cover in those lessons, let me know in the comments below.